So the reason for Biden's Afghanistan jam can be seen pretty clearly in the current planetary positions, because you can go through practically all of them and they are sending a challenging, tricky message, starting with the sun position, which moves pretty quickly as a trigger point day by day, but it's at 24 Leo. It's been in earlier degrees. That zone squares his late Scorpio planets. He has several. Then you switch to Mercury. Mercury and Mars actually are in the 9 to 11 Virgo location, which locks them into Saturn by square. That's not good. That'll correlate with pressure. And then you've got Jupiter basically signaling its move in a station in October where it's actually squaring his Scorpio planets from Aquarius. That isn't good either. And Jupiter is good, but it doesn't function particularly well in squares. Saturn is probably the worst of the lot and probably most responsible for this crisis, because you put it in a position where it's locked into his Pluto-Mars square from Aquarius and moving toward the 6th degree, 7 degrees, which is directly opposite Pluto. If you look at where that Pluto is, that's the international house. And as soon as you bring in a Pluto-Mars factor, you know it's a war thing, foreign affairs thing. It's a perfect mirror, but it's not good, because the Saturn is the planet involved in transit. Then you get Uranus in the middle of Taurus. That opposes all his Scorpio planets, so it's unhelpful as well. But then, though Pluto is 25, Capricorn opposing is Jupiter and doesn't help either, Neptune is the saving grace in that sitting where it is at 23 Pisces and moving toward later degrees in Pisces is a trine to all his Scorpio planets. And so what we have is Neptune as the big planetary force doing that, which is great. And then you get Venus as the lone planet that just at the moment happens to be in early Libra, not doing anything terrible. A matter of fact, it's fine because it's making a nice conjunction and a trine, but everything else is like a siege. You know, it's quite negative. I would say, despite all that, and probably prognosticating that as we go into the station forces in October, Pluto stationing, Jupiter stationing, Saturn stationing, none of which is particularly positive, it's telling us that it's not the greatest time for Biden. But those cycles pass. And as we move into the new year, particularly with Jupiter entering Pisces, which is very friendly to Scorpio, for one thing, and the diminishing pressure of everything else, together with the fact that as catastrophic and awful as this is, what we're seeing in Afghanistan, because, bottom line, it's a humane disaster when you know that people's lives are at risk, people that have cooperated and helped the U.S. and suddenly can't get out for whatever the reason is, plus the plight of women and girls in Afghanistan. That's probably the worst. And yet, politically speaking, for Biden, it's probably his only play. And you have to ask yourself, this was going to happen sooner or later in Afghanistan if the U.S. leaves. It's just the way that country is. It's a hopeless cause. So is it better for it to happen now, or is it better for it to happen later? I would say, politically speaking, probably better now. I'm not saying, when I say that I excuse the humanitarian problem, and I do wish that they had been a little bit more prescient about what could happen, and the fact that it was so quick and so catastrophic in terms of the collapse clearly isn't good. But, it's interesting that the speech he gave today, he chose the Sagittarius moon. In part, he didn't choose it, he had to, because, it's a pressing thing. But that also is pretty good, other than that it opposes Saturn, and so it's highlighting that there's a big problem happening clearly. I mean, the moon is sitting in a spot where it's being squared by Mars. It itself squares Mercury and it opposes Saturn. That matches. But it is the sign of his ascendant. So he's projecting strongly and he's basically saying, this is what I always thought. It's what I was going to do. It's what Trump had already left me with. And what was I going to do? Ramp up and create another surge? That didn't make sense. So bottom line, my sense is that as bad as this looks in the near term, I wouldn't be concerned about Biden's ultimate political fortune. I think he's going to be fine. I know the Republicans are going to try to make hay of this and say everything under the sun, including, of course, Mr. Orange Menace, who's already saying that he should resign in disgrace when he himself was prepared to do deals with the Taliban at Camp David without the Afghan government. I mean, the man is just like a walking bag of hypocrisy. So completely ignore him and completely ignore the entire Republican Party. And I would wait this one out. And what can we say? A totally sad moment, but something that I think Biden is going to get beyond. No doubt about it.